Hey everyone, David Potts here. Today I'm going to talk about the Orthodox 8 tones. This is a video I've been wanting to make for many years actually, and it's actually my first video upon request from my listeners, which are few at this point, which is fine. I'm not looking to go big. But yeah, the 8 tones of the Orthodox Christian worship is something I get a question about somewhat often, especially from people who are beginning to get more familiar with Orthodox worship. And honestly, it's something that's a little bit complicated to answer. The simple version is that if someone asks about the 8 tones or melodies, I just tell them that they're the 8 musical scales that we use in our church services, similar to major or minor scales, but in Orthodox Byzantine style. So these melodies we intersperse in our hymns, add variety and color to our services, and make our music sound either festive or somber or somewhere in between. So this explanation is obviously a bit overly simplistic, but it's the easiest way to explain the 8 tones on a basic level. So then an intermediate explanation, if I was to go a little further, is usually from someone who is maybe musically inclined and wants to learn to chant the 8 tones themselves. So this is where the explanation gets a little bit more complex. I'd usually tell them to go and ask their church choir director for the 8 tone text and memorize the Sunday resurrectional hymns. So there's 8 of those where tone 1 through 8 have a different text and melody. You learn the melody and you learn to sing that melody over various texts that we use. So Sundays obviously have a strong theme about the resurrection. Makes sense. It's the Lord's Day, which he was resurrected, reminding us of Pascha, Easter Sunday. These hymns again vary each week. We have a tone of the week, 1 through 8. We begin with tone 1, we use that for an entire week, tone 2 the following week, until you get to 8, and the cycle repeats themselves. So these hymns come from a service book called the Octoikos, which basically I think just means 8 tones. And once you've learned these 8 resurrectional melodies, you'd be equipped to learn various hymns for the saint of the day, various feasts, your own patron saint. And these hymns that we use are called troparia or apolytikion. One of the most meaningful things you can do on an intermediate level, at this level, is to learn the hymns for your patron saint, for your family, for the patron saint of the church, or for your kids if you have some. So then we get to a more advanced explanation. If this answer is sufficient for you, it gets quite a bit more confusing and complex from here, so you may want to just shut off the video here before I really start nerding out at you. Those who would be interested in more advanced explanation are those who maybe have been in the choir for a while, they're familiar somewhat with the 8 tones, they've seen how they change from week to week as they help chanting. And then people who get more into the advanced levels of understanding why we do these 8 tones, perhaps are beginning to learn and desire to lead church services themselves. Say you want to lead a great Vespers on a Saturday, or even offer midweek services at your church. So those who don't like to nerd out in this way, I'll just say goodbye, so long. And those who are interested on more of the nerdy stuff, here we go. So I'll entice you who are still listening to learn the advanced levels of the 8 tones by dangling this carrot out in front of you. First, I was saying you should learn your patron saint hymn. You should learn a few other saint hymns that might be your favorite, or family members, the saint of the church. But then after you've learned kind of to sing along with the church with the fixed services like Vespers, Matins, and liturgy, you can understand the variable hymns, which again, they change literally week to week in each tone, but even day to day, there's a different tone of the day for each day. So if you can learn these, you can learn to help out the church and your families. So for example, on Sunday we have the resurrectional theme. Friday we have the theme of the cross. And then starting over at the beginning of the week, Monday we have a theme of the angels. Tuesday is John the Baptist. It tends to be more penitential on Tuesdays as well. In the Octoikos book that we're singing the tone of the week over, the texts are also very somber, as well as the melody is very somber in tone too. On Wednesday we celebrate the Mother of God and the cross. Thursday we celebrate actually Saint Nicholas, and on Fridays again the cross. Saturdays is the martyrs and monastics. So let's see, we use the Octoikos with these themes for most of the year, except for during Lent and the bright season after Pascha. So about 40 days before Pascha and 40 days after Pascha. There we use books called the Triodion in Lent and the Pentecostarion in the bright season between Pascha and Pentecost. So sorry if I'm getting a little technical there, but it will help you when you start to observe themes going on. You're wondering where they come from, what books they come from. So they're either from fixed services or these variable hymns. And I put a link in the description for Ages Initiative, which it just gives you the text of the day, and it will show where any text comes from, whether from Vespers, from the Octoikos, Triodion, Pentecostarion, as you sing or read through those services. So if you're to begin to start learning the hymns of the church, I'd recommend starting with the fixed hymns of Vespers first. Lord, I cry to thee, hear me. Learn O Gladsome Light, and learn the Song of Saint Simeon. Lord, I cry to thee, hear me. You might be familiar with a few of those. This is one that does vary in most churches, and you can learn the text that follows is from the Octoikos about the saint of the day and the theme of the day from the tone of the week. So after you learn the fixed hymns of Vespers, and then liturgy is obviously things like Holy God, Holy Mighty, the cherubic hymn, all the communion hymns, things like that. And then the most complicated service is Matins, which again is quite complex. It's the most complex service, so I'd recommend starting with liturgy and Vespers, and start to observe the variable hymns in those services, and then Matins should be last because it's quite complex. There's a section in Matins that I really enjoy, but it actually adds an hour to the already sometimes hour-long Matins service. So there's a section that monastics called the Canon, which is again kind of about the saint of the day and the theme of the day, and it just provides a lot of like really beautiful hymnography. And you might use that maybe at the beginning for just saints that you're really drawn to. Maybe you want to give a whole service longer than like an akatist. You could look up the Ages Initiative text for any saint that you feel drawn to. So anyway, the last thing I wanted to mention is what I've included in the description below. So there's a really good YouTube where you can learn the 8 tones through the resurrectional hymns online. I put a link to that. Then I put a link to, actually it's a children's like youth summer camp who did an explanation of the 8 tones. I thought they did a really good job, the best I've found out there. And then they give you an example of how to learn the tones. And then I put a link to Ages Initiative, which again is like, you can look up Vespers, Matins, and of the day, and it will include all those variable hymns to the saint of the day and the theme of the day. Then I just put a link to a really beautiful version of Tone 1 Vesperal tone, which is a very beautiful Byzantine hymn. And it's just a good example of some of the variety in the vesperal tones. And then finally, for those who maybe want to become choir directors or chanters, I found a series really helpful by St. Tikhon Seminary, which explains in more detail all the books that we use. So, for example, Ages Initiative compiles everything for you, so you don't have to do all the work of compiling for yourself. But in the age before, digital compilations like that, we used different books. So again, they had on their chanter stand a book for the, say, Vespers from the Orologion, and then the Octoikos next to that, and then the Saint of the Day book is called the Manean next to that. And you'd be flipping back and forth, and you might go to a church where they do things like that. So anyway, it just helps you understand what's going on. If you're like me, I just really like to know why we do what we're doing. It helps me enter into like prayer more if I'm not wondering, well, why are we doing it this way? So the last thing to keep in mind is that every church has a different set of these melodies, even in the 8 tones. It might be more Russian style, Byzantine style. There's even kind of other Slavic versions called Uspensky and Smolensk. Fancy words for just different versions of the 8-tone melodies. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as learning the Russian melodies or Byzantine melodies. There are many different versions out there that different churches use. So unfortunately, it's not consistent across every archdiocese, say, always having the Russian version or the Byzantine version. It can be quite complex. So just my recommendation is to just talk with your choir director about why they use the version that they use, and have him give you a demonstration of how to sing the 8-tone melody over the text. That will also save me from having to give you an embarrassing demonstration of singing over the text myself. So again, if you can learn all these things and somehow make sense of this quite confusing explanation, the reward is that you can either help in the choir with chanting and be able to enter in more deeply into prayer. You could do this in your personal prayers for practice and just observe kind of the why behind what we're doing. And I think the greatest thing is that you could learn how to chant the services, daily services in your own home with your family. My family and I have our own little tradition of Vespers that we do every night with our kids. And it makes it really rich for our kids to fall asleep to daily Vespers, and we intersperse our own favorite hymns into a Vesper service. And that's something that a lot of people don't really realize, is that lay people do have a blessing to hold, daily services in their own home for Vespers and Matins. You don't have to be an ordained reader or clergy to do that. It's blessed. It's something that the church gives guidance for. For example, there's certain, you throw out the litanies, the intercessory hymns, and there's some different ways you go about it. But if you look into it, doing a reader's Vespers and Matins, it can be really meaningful. The other thing is, do you remember when during COVID we couldn't, many of us go to church? Many of the churches were closed for liturgy on Sundays. So we had to make do with whatever we had at home. And so instead of, obviously you can't hold a liturgy at home, but there is a service called the Typica that you can do with your family at home, or again, a Matins or on a Sunday morning that allows you to do a service. If for whatever reason you can't go to church or you're far from a church, you can begin to learn the hymns to hold your own services as you have need. So that's my explanation of the 8 tones, and I hope it was more or less simple. Forgive me where I got off track or is more complex than I can simplify for you. So check out the links in the description about some other resources, and God bless you all with your journey, and we will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.